by Riverside.
Well, April, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Great. Love your bumper music.
Yeah, it's really cool. I like it too. Well, it's so good. So excited to have this conversation with you.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm going to give you a question to kind of warm up the conversation. So, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Wow, that's a good one. Probably from my grandmother and she's probably stole it from somebody else, but definitely never to give up, to keep going. And
Well, I
and
love
there's a
that.
lot of
That
stories
is so
behind
important.
that. Yeah, there's a lot of stories behind that one little saying. So we can talk about that later. My grandmother's been a big influence in my life, so I think it's pretty cool the way that she can you can say the words, but when you know the story behind it, it's pretty powerful.
Well, why don't you share the story? I'm curious to hear it.
Yeah, so my grandmother, she has probably she's passed away several years ago, but she has probably close to 300 grandchildren and great grandchildren. She grew up, her and my grandfather ran a bunch of cabins on Lake Huron in Michigan. She grew up during the Depression. And when she could never finish high school, so she went back at, I think it was 74, 75, and she ended up getting straight A. She even took auto mechanics because my uncle was part of auto mechanics, and she wanted to understand exactly what he did and made sure that he was being honest with people when he took care of their cars. And so she graduated high school at that time, then went on to learn computers. And then, she's always been this person that loves people, talks to people, and her house was a revolving door where people would come and be encouraged by her, inspired by her. She was such a great lady, and it was her religion was her core and her Christianity, and so she was a very, very strong person in that way. And then she when she was I think it was like close to 80, the church had a big youth group, and they couldn't find a youth pastor, anybody that would take the youth out and do anything with. And she said, well, we're not going to leave them hanging. They need to be able to get out and do things, and we want to create this community for them. So she took that on and took him out on this outing, a float trip. And of course, everybody was, freaking out that my grandmother's going to die. She's going on this float trip. So everybody came around as a community to take care of him. But that's kind of her entire life. She was that type of a person, and quite the inspiration to myself and many of my other cousins.
Oh, that's such a neat story.
Hmm.
I'm curious. You mentioned your grandmother. Who were other people in your life who served as inspiration for you?
I'd say there's a lot of women. Our family comes from a lot of small business people, and so my aunt, she just passed away probably 8 months ago, and she was one of the first butchers in Michigan, and she had this small little market deli store out in the country, and she really inspired me in the business area. I remember going out there and hanging out with my cousin. And rather than hanging out with my cousin, I'd rather hang out with my aunt in her store. And she would give me these big, huge green bar paper for anyone that's been around long enough. But it's these big pieces of paper with inventory sheets on them that they used to print off to check out inventory. And she would take that and give it to me. And I'd go home and I'd start my own little store and my own little cafe. And of course, I had the best mud burgers in the world. And just that inspiration that she gave me, she was just a stellar woman, very strong. All of my aunts, in fact, I have another aunt of mine who just came out here and visited my mom, who's living with us now, and she's in her mid 70s. And her and her uncle, they still farm, they still build, remodel things. They're just very active people that just keep going and never give up. And they count every minute of their life as precious time, and that's the way I grew up, and I'm very inspired by that, and that's what's kept held me together. I grew up very poor. My dad converted a barn into a house, and so I remember in the wintertime we didn't have a lot of money, and we'd close off all the the rooms in the house, and we would live in the kitchen because there was electric heat. So for me, it was like just the inspiration of continuing to go. I couldn't, when after I got married, I went and finished my school. I still have like 8 classes left in my bachelor. So I've been able to make it my entire career just by working very hard and very smart. So I'm just very grateful for that upbringing and for those women who, influenced me in my life.
I love your story. So, what sets you apart from others in your field?
Well, I think my background, I get the question asked quite often of how do you go from working from big corporations like Procter and Gamble, Starbucks, for large brokerage working with consumer products to working for a startup. And I'd say that I always had a desire for new business development. At P&G, they were always giving me, projects or teams or things to go fix. They kind of called me the bulldog because I would just go get it done. And so I always leaned toward, those types of things of new business. And I still have my consulting business and did some consulting for companies that they're direct to consumer companies who wanted to go to retail. So for me, I've always had that desire to do a startup. And Robert Salvador, who is the CEO of DigiBuild, where I work today, asked me, we're going on 5 years now, 4.5 years ago, asked if I'd come do the startup with him. And Robert and I worked together at Procter and Gamble. He was one of the guys that worked for me. And so I was like, okay, let me think about this. It's in construction and it's software. Sure, let's go do it. So it's been quite the learning curve. And every day I get up and grateful for this opportunity to be able to do this and help change an entire industry by what we're building out and the people's lives that we're building capacity for and margin and just creating a happier and healthier environment for them by building their capacity and helping them with their work.
We've kind of got pieces of your story, so kind of give us your journey. I'm curious to find out how you got from where you started in that, in the coal barn to where you are today. Tell us your journey.
Yeah, so I would say that when I was younger, my dad he was in construction. He loved what he did. He was a cabinet, did a lot of finishing work with cabinets. In the wintertime, just with any construction industry where there's a winter, you're not in the south so much. The job opportunities are very slim. You're still trying to provide for your family. You get depressed because you can't. You try finding odd jobs and other work, and you get into this drink culture that happens in construction. And my dad was no different than that. And he was great at what he did, but he wasn't a good business manager, which is very typical of sometimes in the industry where people have this amazing skill or trade, but they're just not really good at the soft skills. And so that was the issue with my dad, that he just couldn't cope with some of that. And when I was 8 years old, 8.5 years old, he committed suicide. And I think what was surprising for me with that is when I got into this industry with Rob, just how prevalent that was. And if you start doing the research, construction has one of the highest suicide rates of any industry out there. I think dentist is higher, which was crazy. I'm not sure why dentists are committing suicide, which is really sad. But that was like a turning point for me to say, I had never talked about my story. I thought it was kind of unique. And then when I realized that there's more suicides in construction than there's actually accidents on job sites, it really took me back a little bit. So the software that we're creating allows people, from whether they're small or large, it doesn't matter how big the construction or supplier company is, they can be part of our platform. They can use it, they can benefit from it and take advantage. They don't have to be this huge corporation to be able to do it. So that's been our theme. Is both Rob and I, our fathers both were in construction, and Rob's dad still is in construction, has his own subcontracting company right now, and they struggled equally in many areas. And so that's what we're doing, is trying to change an industry and bring technology to them that's very simple to use, but really helps them save a lot of money, as well as save a lot of time. And that's our goal. So that's kind of my journeys with my dad. And then is, all those people, those women around me that have influenced me in my life that I've spoken of, my grandmother, my aunt, my mom. They've just really done a really good job of teaching us hard work ethic. I remember my first job at 5 years old, shoveling snow with my brother. He dragged me along on one of his jobs, and I got $5. Well, $5 back then was like, wow. I mean, didn't have a concept for money, but I absolutely knew how many Swedish fish it would buy for me at the little local candy store where you go in and the candy was in behind a little cabinet. It was an old school store, and so that was really cool to understand the value of money and hard work at a very young age. And I think by the time I graduated from high school, I'd had over 20 some jobs.
Sorry to hear about your dad. That's a tough part of your story. But
Yes.
glad you took that to find ways to make the other people in the industry kind of deal with some of those issues there. I'm curious, what role do you see digitalization playing? You talked about construction. Kind of tell us how those two technologies are married in your company.
Right. So what DigiBuild does is we do all the bid order tracking of supplies for construction projects, which is pretty massive. When you think about, just think of a Marriott, for example, everything that goes into, breaking ground to the time occupancy occurs, including all the furnishings and fixtures that are in there, carpet, decorating, everything that goes into building that particular project is we order all those supplies. We allow you to get on our platform and bid for all those supplies. So all the suppliers that are in our database, they get in there for free. The service for them is we love them. They're our partners. You can please join and we'll allow you to bid on every project that comes through our system. And that's unusual because a lot of people charge suppliers to participate in that process, which I'm not quite sure why they would do that. There's huge benefit, but they do. And so for so all that process, that workflow that people do within this industry when they're going to bid takes hours. Like most construction companies can only get maybe one, two, three bids because of our extensive database, which we're building out one of the largest global databases of suppliers in the world, as well as sustainable suppliers. And then among those suppliers, this is really cool. We identify who is minority owned, female owned, and veteran owned, so that there's some choices in there people can make. Some of these smaller companies that never get exposure, you can choose to choose one of those companies, which we're finding a lot of traction for. So I love that. That's that whole ecosystem of bringing everybody in together. So we do all those processes. So like on a Marriott, we just saved one company close to $675,000 in bidding materials, and about another 300 hours on labor savings. That just by not having to track those orders and call those suppliers, it's all done within our platform. And 24/7, they can get in there and see where their product's at. They can request updates. It's all based on the project schedule. So there's alerts that say, hey, you got to get this ordered. This is behind. So it's really like almost like an administrative assistant, a VA for the industry that for all their ordering and procurement needs, which is really cool. So in technology within the industry,
It is
um,
real.
yeah. So in this industry, technology is just beginning to be adopted. I mean, Autodesk and Procore, they're two really large companies that have done a lot for this industry and trying to drag the industry with them. But there's so much more. When I worked for Procter and Gamble, you'll look around and how many shampoos are there out there, right? There's tons of them. And so there's so much room and growth. It's not like this is the leader or you're competing with everyone. In this industry, it's all tides rise together. And that is for sure what's happening now. It's taken many years. When we first started this, we couldn't get people to talk or adopt the technology, or they just didn't have time. That's a big factor. But they're also just not tech savvy. I mean, they're still using Excel and Dropbox, and that's mainly their main source of how they get information back of the napkin. I had a couple months ago had a company tell me that they just got rid of their fax machine. So that's how old school it is. So I'm hoping with the industry and the younger generation coming in, there's going to be a lot more adoption for this, and we've been beginning to see that, which is exciting.
Construction, you kind of think of it as kind of a male dominated industry. What challenges you as a female had to overcome to work in this sector?
Yeah, for me, because it's technology, um, my counterparts in like I was part of the Women Build summit and actually spoke there back a few months ago in up in Boston, and it is stunning to me. I think I read the latest statistic that there was like 11% of the women were in construction. I don't know where that stat came from because it's been at 3 to 5, 6% since, I can remember. And all these women who have been in the industry for a long time have said it's really the needle's not really moved. And where it has moved is more like on the architect engineering side. So maybe there's a lot more of those positions that people are moving into. But the actual trades of people being out there, women being out there, welding and doing some of that. It has been very low, and it's a tough industry to be in if you're a female. And from many aspects, as people could imagine in construction, where it comes from. What I'm excited about, though, is I do see this trend where women are looking more at using their hands and being creative and getting in the trades. And I have a friend of mine who's a welder. In fact, I'm an advisor on a company called Weld Chain, and they work with trades and they encourage women to get into that trade and to build up their portfolio of their welds and to be able to document their welds. So they have this almost like a resume to take with them. And there's a lot of interest in with women in welding, believe it or not, and some of these other industries. And I think you can see that even like the do it yourself industry has really created a lot of women who are out there, taking the hammers and nails now and remodeling and doing some very fun stuff there. And I've got friends that, you know, girlfriends that are totally into construction and remodeling and flipping homes. And so I think that has spurred some more interest from women to actually adopt maybe a trade to get into versus, going out and being an executive or some other just, 4-year degree kind of program, but getting into something where they're using their hands a little bit more. So I see the trend changing.
So for women listening to this podcast going, this sounds really interesting. What advice do you have women trying to get into the industry?
I would say that I would go talk to people that are in the industry because there's so many different options and roles that you could play. When you think of a construction project, there's about 150 people that come together, and they're from different companies, and they come together to create this beautiful, project or building or whatever they're putting together. And that works is pretty incredible in itself. But you think about 150 people coming together. Well, those are 150 people with individual jobs of all sorts. And so there's a lot of room to do some cross trade work. Maybe there's some interest in one area in a trade and another. So you could almost cross pollinate, and have some opportunities to do 2 or 3 different types of positions, which a lot of people do like. People get bored at doing the same thing day in and day out. And then it helps just physically. There's a lot of stuff, that you're doing physically. And so if you could complement yourself by, taking on 2 or 3 different skills within the industry to make sure your body lasts a little bit longer and take care of that along the way, I think that's good. And then I would also say in this industry, there's a lot of smart wear out there, clothing and wear that monitor your heart and monitor, you know, your if you're getting dehydrated and some of the your oxygen levels and stuff. And I think that's really, I would say, start adopting some of those things early on, so that you're not only taking care of yourself, from you're taking care of yourself from a health perspective as well.
So technology seems like it's really taken over many industries. How do you see, as you're looking down the road for construction, what impact will things like AI or other technology really play in your industry? You see,
Right. So DigiBuild is actually built on blockchain. So we use that blockchain use case. We don't use crypto, but we use that use case to drive transparency in the industry. And I think that's a big deal. So anytime there's a transaction that's made, a supplier gives a particular bid to one of our clients, and the person comes in and they bid on it, but then they go back and they might say, well, no, that wasn't the actual bid that we gave you. It's actually that. Well, we on the blockchain, it actually shows, no, this was actually the bid at this date and time. This bid came through. So it's an evidence-based software, right? That here's the data that shows otherwise. And in this industry, that is a major problem, is that it's whose truth are you going to go with? And that's why there's, lots of disputes that happen in this industry. So I think that's one of the things that driving transparency, also helps the little guys, because my dad, sometimes he wouldn't even get paid. Like they'd say, oh, we didn't like your work, or we don't have any money. And so then he wouldn't get paid. And so that was another thing that drives that depression, and you're feeling like you're helpless and you don't have control of your own destiny within your work. So I think that's a big one there. And then we also use artificial intelligence to go out and find suppliers. We use it to help do coding. We help it to we haven't done this as much, but we're really beginning to dig into this as substitutions for a regular supplier versus a sustainable supplier. So what could you substitute for a sustainable product that's very much like that? You can, find out how to even how to write documents in a way using AI that pass the legal sniff test. So if you're, by yourself and you've got your own company and you're a small guy and can't afford the lawyers, there's ways to just say, hey, here's my problem, send it out to AI and have them kind of write a letter, and kind of some of the information that you normally would pay a lawyer to, you could actually get that in there. And then you're just paying a lawyer to look over the information versus having to pay someone. So I think there's all kinds of ways to use AI, and it's nothing to be scared or afraid of. There's obviously questions that we need to answer. I just don't see artificial intelligence replacing people anytime soon. We're people. We like connection. We like interaction. So I don't see that happening.
Interesting.
Which is a
So
question
what are
I
you
get all.
excited about this season?
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I bet. Yes. No, it is something we do think about. It's like we watch all those movies and we do have that concern of, is it going to try to replace us at one point? So
I think there's concerns though, like in the writing industry, the writing guild, right? I mean, people's identity being taken. I mean, that's like stealing someone's identity to go out there and try to create a film using someone's digital twin, and taking a script that, a writer spent, a lot of time and thought into, and going out and try to duplicate that type of style and that work, and I think there definitely needs to be parameters around that. That's, to me, that's theft, right? That's already on the books. So just including that in the laws that we have, that you cannot go out and steal someone's identity. And I would feel like that's stealing someone's identity. So I think we need to, put some books, laws on the books, and ensure there's some, parameters out there that people aren't being ripped off from, other companies. But I think that's just logical stuff to me.
just heard this somewhere that they're also doing with podcasts now. Their AI is creating its own podcast, and so it's like it's not really the person anymore. They're just AI generated voices and content.
Right. And I guess if you're an individual and you want to use AI that way to create your own business, that's one thing. But taking someone else's identity, again, I would really feel very strongly against something like that.
I agree. So, April, what are you excited about this season of your life?
Oh my goodness, DigiBuild's taking off. It's very exciting to see what's happening. We're going to go global. We're looking to expand in the United Arab Emirates and in the Middle East. We've got connections in Nigeria and South Africa, West Africa. We've got connections in Ireland and the UK now. So we're already a global company, but talking about establishing actually offices in these different places is very exciting, where there's some growth. I think one of the other things that keeps me really going every day that I'm very excited about is that our social impact company is Emancipate. They are a 501(c) company, and they help trafficked women and children. And they actually have a program where they take women that have been trafficked and men and put them through college, and then they actually get them jobs. So even though they're a nonprofit, they'll take donations every day, but their real goal is to be able to give people jobs and opportunities to grow. And so one of the things that we've been doing with DigiBuild is that they're helping us uh, with helping us to identify really good suppliers, building that supplier network and that relationship, pre-qualifying them. They're doing some of our business development outreach. So there's a really exciting time to see companies like Emancipate be able to do those types of skills, bring those skills to the table. So we've got architects and engineers and people that are part of our ecosystem, that they're actually part of a startup company and get to use their skills here. You know, they're some of them from the Philippines, a lot of East Asia, you know, Latin America. So it's very exciting to be able to partner with companies where we're actually helping change people's lives in that way as well. So I'd encourage anyone that is interested in supporting a 501(c) and looking for support, whether it's building your business out and doing business development, or having someone do calling for you and pre-qualifying your customers, or setting up podcast tours, whatever it is. They've kind of got a one and done package. They've architected something I've never seen before, where they support all aspects of small business and even larger businesses to help them thrive while supporting people and giving them jobs. And that's exciting to me.
It's such a good cause. I just did a
Mhm.
podcast on human trafficking. I think it's $1 billion industry, and so it's an important issue for us to tackle in our society. So thanks for being part of that.
Yeah, it's very exciting.
I love to ask my guests this question, April. So, what do you want your legacy to be?
That I was able to change industries and people's lives by bringing them along on my journey. That would be my legacy.
I love that. Is there anything I haven't asked you, April, that I should have asked you?
Um, I think probably the thing that I would say to people starting out in new business, that's a huge growth area, whether it's in construction or anywhere. People want to know, like, what is it that helps you tick? And then we talked about the personal side of my life, of, you know, the family members and my aunts and my grandmother and those people that have come along. I would say in my professional life, I've had some great mentors that have been fantastic and given me the opportunities, as well as teaching me along the way. I think the thing that impacted my life, there was two things that really impacted my life from a career standpoint, and that was Strength Finders, which is a book. Oh my goodness, It's by Mark Rath, I think Mark Rath, and it is a book that just talks about focusing on your strengths versus the things that you're not good at. And as humans, we're always trying to be better at something. Every type of review I've ever had in my life, you go into a room and bring it some tissues because they're going to say, yeah, you did really good at this, but, and then there's like 3,000 lists of all the things that you need to improve on. And what I learned through the Strength Finders is what are my core skills that I'm very, very good at. And in the premise of the entire book is, if you focus on those things that you are very good at, you'll be successful. And so I've taken that to heart. I actually have used it to build two high performance work teams. I've created probably close to 20 sales teams in my career, and two to three of them have really been high performance. And that was because I used that Strength Finders model to find out within my team, you know, first of all, allowing people to understand who they are and give them a roadmap to their strengths versus putting in roles where they're not strong and setting them up for failure. I think it's awful, you know, and it's awful feeling to be on that side. But it's on a, you feel, you know, incredible when you can help somebody understand what their strengths are and let them go do those things that are going to benefit them and benefit the company. And so I'd say Strength Finders is one of those core things. And I think the other thing is emotional intelligence. That came out in the 80s. It's come back with a vengeance, and people are really still talk about it. And I think the core thing to that is the first step in that state who you are as a person. And I think Strength Finders helped me to do that. But being that self awareness is so critical. Don't lie to yourself about what you can do and what you can't do. Really hone in on what you're good at and go do it. And find the industries where you can participate, and don't let anybody tell you you can't do it. Just find the right people and the right mix of people that you're going to be able to work with to be successful, because the world's a lot bigger and broader than you think. Sometimes we get so stuck in our little social media world, or the little pocket of an industry that sometimes we're in. And that's what I learned after I left Procter and Gamble, that there was so many more. There's more to the story and more opportunities out there than sometimes we really understand. And so it's taking that leap of faith in yourself, and taking your skills and going to apply them. And then I think there's just emotional intelligence from a standpoint of like self management. You do have to, part of that self awareness allows you to self manage yourself, because you're not lying about yourself, right? It's there's things that you need to do to improve, but also, to manage your time and your life. And then you go into like social awareness of how, or do you really listening to other people? Do you really understand what's being communicated to you about yourself and about the world around you, and being honest about that, and showing empathy, and understanding positional authority versus true authority. So there's all those things. And I think the last thing to that was just being able to manage those relationships as you make that journey across there. And that's kind of what I've learned through emotional intelligence, is to be able to take all those things about, from self-awareness, your self-management, to your social awareness, and then being able to really then do real true relationship management. And that's where the magic happens, is being able to influence other people and coach and mentor, and like I said, to be able to bring them along. And that's why I'm able to do that, and that's why I've been so successful. And then of course my core is my Christianity, so I also have a deep faith in uh, the Lord, and really the guidance there, and believe in providence. And I really have a strong belief that bringing people along is part of that, right? Is really taking care of people, and then you'll be taken care of.
Exactly. I love that. So where can listeners find your website, for especially like suppliers who maybe want to get connected with you and DigiBuild?
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Suppliers, please give us a shout. Info at DigiBuild, DigiBuild.com, or you can reach out to me, April Moss, on LinkedIn, and just put April Moss DigiBuild. I think I'm the only one at DigiBuild that's April Moss. And then you can just go to our website at digibuild.com. And we are changing our website a little bit, so there's messaging and stuff is being updated. So hopefully it's running today.
Well, April, thanks so much. Thank you so for being on the podcast and for what you do and letting your faith shine through in your business and helping others to lift them up too, and highlight the gifts that God has given them. So thank you for this time. We really appreciate the
Thank you.
conversation.
Appreciate it.